Hello, I'm Robert Dakota of Worldviews Media, and I'm here to introduce you to Michael Cremo, author of Forbidden Archeology. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Michael.
Good to be with you, Robert.
I think the first time that I got to see you speak was in Sedona in 2012. Was that correct? Were you here in 2012 for CPAC?
Uh, I think, yeah, I was there for CPAC that year. That's right. Yes.
Yeah, so that's the first time I remember hearing you speak, and I remember you talking in tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and even millions of years. And I know a lot of people would right away find that skeptical, but when I've traveled around and spoken to indigenous people and indigenous people here in the Southwest, they speak in the same type of terms that they may not have the specific science to back it up. They still think in that way, and somehow, like Graham Hancock says, we've got some sort of amnesia to our past deep antiquity. Can you tell me a little bit about forbidden archaeology and thinking in these long terms of history, long cycles of years?
Yeah. Um, you know, you really have to appreciate that I approach things from a transcultural perspective. You could say I'm a transcultural person, and being trans anything is not so easy. But yeah, but a lot of us are transcultural in the sense that we may have grown up in Western modern culture, but somehow or other through different pathways that we've taken in our lives, we've come in contact with indigenous knowledge traditions, ancient wisdom traditions. Myself, I know a key event in my life was my contact with the spiritual tradition of ancient India. I remember when I was young, I was living in Europe, and I went hitchhiking in Sweden, and I went to a youth hostel in Stockholm, and I met some kids who had traveled overland from India and back, to India and back overland. You could do that in those days. It'd be very difficult to do now, but I heard from them, in the youth hostel. They were kind of talking about all their adventures in the Himalayas and in Kashmir and places like that. And I decided, I'd like to go. So eventually I did, and I began studying some of the writings of this wisdom tradition, the Puranas, which are the historical and cosmological texts of ancient India. And in them, I was encountering these descriptions of human populations, human civilizations that existed on Earth millions of years ago. And not only that, but that human populations on Earth were part of a whole universal hierarchy of beings. There were human-like beings in other parts of the universe as well. So I thought this is really fantastic. It's something a little bit different than anything I learned from my teachers in high school or university. So I became, now you don't have to do this, but I became a little interested I think, well, how does this interface with what modern science is turning up in terms of evidence, physical evidence? So when I looked in the current textbooks, I didn't see any evidence for extreme human antiquity. I However, I decided I'm going to look beyond the textbooks. I'm going to look into the whole history of archaeology. And when I did that, I was really astonished to find there were many archaeologists and geologists and paleontologists who had reported finding human bones, human artifacts, human footprints going way far back in time. The modern consensus among archaeologists is that humans like us came into existence between 300,000 and 200,000 years ago. But as you were mentioning, a lot of these ancient wisdom traditions from indigenous peoples or old civilizations tell of a far more ancient human presence. And I think there's a certain logic to it that, according to many of these indigenous knowledge traditions and ancient wisdom traditions, the universe and our earth are not accidental. We're not just the result of some random fluctuation in the quantum energy fields. There's a purpose to the whole place, and that is to enable us to evolve our consciousness up to higher levels. So, if that's the case, and the human bodily vehicle is really well equipped to do that sort of thing, if we use it for its proper purpose, if that's the case, then I think it's not surprising if the universe is there for a purpose, and that purpose is to enable conscious entities with the human bodily vehicle to elevate their consciousness, then I think we'd expect that that human vehicle has been around for a long time, since pretty close to the beginning. It's like if we send a space station into outer space orbiting the Earth, scientists and engineers, they do things like that. They don't just hope that somehow or other some of the chemicals in the space station will combine together and gradually evolve into intelligent people capable of operating the machinery. No, they make the space station because their astronauts are going to inhabit it and use it for some intelligent purpose. So I've tried to combine my science and my spirituality. Actually, one of my latest books is called My Science, My Religion. And that's a collection of 24 papers I presented on these topics at mainstream international scientific conferences, meetings of the World Archeological Congress, meetings of the European Association of Archaeologists, where I directly present a view that integrates spirituality and scientific evidence in the fields of archaeology and anthropology. So basically, even if I'm talking about stones and bones, archaeological discoveries, for me, the main meaning of it all is we need new explanations of human origins, who we are and where we come from. And basically, I think the answers, they've been around for a long time in these ancient wisdom traditions. And basically, it adds up to ultimately we're beings of pure consciousness, and we just have to excavate it.
How did you get interested in, I know you went to India, but what made you go further and keep going with this? Because you do get resistance from some people who are skeptical, don't you? I know that some people give you a hard time, which I don't think is fair. But what drives you?
Well, you could say I'm a little bit provocative in a sense, so maybe I stir people up a little bit. That may be a fact. But I would say ever since I was very young, since I was a child, I've always had certain desires, certain ambitions, certain feelings inside. And among them was a desire to know what's the truth, what the reality of our existence really is. And that may have something to do with the fact that my father was a military intelligence officer. So I kind of grew up understanding there is such a thing as secret knowledge, access to facts that many people don't have. So that has always driven me to look beyond the surface of things, the surface presentation of things, and look for what the actual truth may be, even if it's unpopular, even if it means some sacrifice. I mean, it would be great to be born at a time when one's personal convictions are shared by the influential and leading circles of whatever society it is one happens to be in. That would be wonderful. But there's another type of wonderful situation, being in the minority, even a minority of one. So, that's part of what drives me along, you could say. And another thing has been the search for love. I practice a form of yoga. It's called bhakti yoga, the yoga of devotion, the yoga of love, you could say. And that's, I believe, primeval force in the universe. And trying to discover the true expression of unselfish love is something that drives me. So I look at my work, my research, as part of my yoga, part of my meditation, it's how I relate to the world. And then I would say I've always been a kind of adventuresome person, willing to take a risk, a step into the unknown, try something different. I've always been like that. So in 1973, I was at a Grateful Dead concert in upstate New York, and I got a copy of Bhagavad-Gita from some Krishna devotees, Hare Krishna devotees, who were traveling around with the Grateful Dead at that time. I didn't know who they were or what they were about, but I liked the book, the Bhagavad Gita. I was always interested in Indian philosophy and meditation and yoga and reincarnation and ideas like that. So I got it. I was really impressed with the book and the author, so I got some more information about it and gradually came to the point to becoming the disciple of the guru who had translated that edition of the Bhagavad Gita. So that is how I became involved in these things, and it's been a really amazing journey. Of course, everyone has to discover their own path, their own amazing journey. And kind of along the way, we meet lots of interesting people. And I'm really looking forward to the event in Sedona and the Earth Origins event. It seems like a, a really fantastic opportunity to reconnect with some of the personalities who are also on that great journey, and really looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to having you here as well, Michael. Ever since I saw you that first time there in CPAC, I thought I will look more into the information that this guy's offering, especially since it says it's forbidden. Um, Something about that just draws your attention.
Well, yeah, it's kind of interesting. The title of the book, Forbidden Archaeology, is kind of passed into, it's become a general term. A lot of people use it. Kind of, like how Xerox became a word that meant copy of paper or something. Certain brand names become generic terms. So I think forbidden archaeology is like that. It was the title of the book I wrote, but now it's kind of become adopted by our alternative culture and alternative science and alternative reality types of people. So, I think that's fantastic. The reason I called it forbidden archaeology is because although these reports of archaeological evidence for extreme human antiquity are there in what I call the primary scientific literature, the original reports by archaeologists, geologists, other scientists who are digging into the earth, although this information is very well documented, it's published in their peer-reviewed scientific publications, you don't find it in the textbooks, the secondary literature. So that's kind of amazing. And I had to ask myself, why? Why is this being filtered out in this way? So it's sort of forbidden in that sense. It's there, but it's very difficult to get access to. So,
Why do you think archaeology seems to want to stick to a very short period of time of human existence?
well, I think the reason for it has to do with a lot of things, but it has to do with the ideas they have about what a human being actually is. Now, most scientists today, whether they're archaeologists or biologists or physicists or whatever, if they're part of the modern scientific establishment, they tend to think that a human being is a machine made of molecules. That's all there is to it. And as far as consciousness is concerned, well, that's a temporary byproduct of bioelectrical activity in the brain. So if they have these kinds of ideas, then they have to think, well, what was the beginning? The beginning had to have been just chemicals. And somehow or other, some of them got together and formed some first single self-reproducing cell. And then after a long time, some of those single-celled creatures started clumping together. And it's kind of like a long road till you get to something like a human being with trillions of cells organized in very complex organs doing pretty amazing things like they think the brain is doing. So, they have that idea that, we're really ultimately just purely materialistic creatures, machines made of molecules. So I think that's why they favor the idea that human beings like us appear rather late in the process rather than right at the beginning. Because they think, well, we're molecular machines in an accidental universe, so that's it. And I'm simplifying things here a little, of course, but basically that's the attitude, and that's why they want to have humans appearing rather late in the process, because that's what they would expect. If you have humans appearing very early in the history of life on Earth or in the universe, that kind of shakes things up. You might start asking questions. Well, maybe we're not really understanding what a human being really is, because despite decades of effort, they've not been able to come up with any very good explanation of how you can get consciousness from some combination of chemical elements. It's something that's one of the unresolved problems in modern reductionist materialist science. But the real truth may be that consciousness has an existence independent from matter. Of course, some people like panpsychism, that consciousness is a property of matter that's becoming an idea that's some people are looking to as a possible solution. I myself remain pretty much a dualist in the sense that I believe that there is a conscious self that can survive the death of the gross physical body, continue to exist, take on another bodily existence. And these are ideas that are very common in the different worldviews. And in my book, Human Devolution, I did a cross-cultural study of cosmologies, looked at about 40 to 50 different cultures, widely spaced in time and space, and they all pretty much have the same ideas, that there is a conscious self that's different than the gross material body. There's a subtle material body which has very unusual powers like psychokinesis, remote viewing, and things like that. They tend to see we exist in a multi-level cosmos with inhabited by different types of beings at the different levels. We're in the gross material level of the cosmos, where we have to take on bodies made of gross physical elements. They would say then there are higher levels in the universe where you have beings that take on a more subtle type of material body. And then beyond that, there's the level of pure consciousness. So there are these themes that run across cultures. And I take that as evidence that independently they're looking at the reality, maybe seeing it from a slightly different perspective, but basically getting the same picture of who we are, where we are in the cosmos.
The Antiquity goes back a lot further, I think, than some think. I saw some scriptures, some texts out of Japan, and if you look at some of the latest evidence, things seem to just keep getting older and older. And if you understand the Ice Age and some cataclysms that have happened in between, it would be easy to sort of erase a whole civilization that existed before. And the way they describe things and tell things may be very different than the way we see things or understand things.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at some Buddhist texts, for example. They have what they call the Jataka literature, the previous appearances of the Buddha. And I was kind of looking into them because, someone had heard me speaking about extreme human antiquity on some radio show, Coast to Coast or something like that. And they were from the Buddhist tradition, and they told me you should look into the Buddhist tradition because there's a similar idea that Buddha had appeared in different ages, and for the same purpose that he appeared in his most recent form, to educate people about the nature of reality and how to end suffering. So, it describes how these different incarnations or appearances of Buddha existed millions of years ago, even hundreds of millions of years ago, and in the course of cyclical time, where, as you were pointing out, perhaps there are events, periodic catastrophes that kind of wipe the disk clean, you could say, in terms of evidence for these ancient human civilizations and populations. Ultimately, I think, however, in a consciousness-based universe, we see it's more like we're in a virtual reality system, and what we call planets aren't simply balls of stone floating in a vacuum, but rather they're locations for conscious experience that are meant to deliver certain type of conscious experience. Like on the airplanes, they've got economy class, which delivers a certain type of experience, a lot of discomfort, iniquity. And then business class gives a slightly different experience, and then first class with your private cabin or something like that. So the universe may be more like that than just balls of stone floating around in space.
Why do you think it is that India has such an ancient tradition or memory, and they kind of have it in text? Some of the other indigenous cultures have it in oral memory. Why do you think India has held on to such a longer understanding?
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing question, because one of the things that attracted me to India was, I was thinking, okay, you've got, the ancient Greeks, with their contacts with gods and all kinds of strange features of reality, and there's a whole system of thought and practice. But if you go there today, you don't see representatives of that practice, whatever it was. I mean, maybe you could say there's a few tiny shreds of it, a few individuals here and there, but in terms of, say, like the Egyptians, for example, there's a whole developed culture there in Egypt, the Egyptian priests were into all kinds of things. But you go there today, there's not so many of those Egyptian priests have made it from thousands of years ago to today. But as you're pointing out, it seems that in India, their ancient traditions have been preserved for some reason. And that could be because there could be several reasons, but it seems they have been able to maintain what they call lines of disciplic succession somehow or other. That these teachings, they're passed from guru to disciple down through the ages. And it seems that many of these lines of disciplic succession have managed to survive India's encounter with modernity, different invasions, colonial domination. Somehow or other, it's managed to stay alive, just like some indigenous Native American Indian traditions have managed to survive all kinds of disturbances, which I won't go into. But so I think that's one reason it's survived there. And I kind of find that attractive, but that's kind of how I see that.
Do you think that they were more or less an advanced culture compared to us, or an advanced civilization with flying machines and architecture that's really over the top, possible evidence of past nuclear wars, maybe or some kind of nuclear at what's the Mohenjo-Daro, where they found vitreous glass. It seems like when they talk about a really ancient civilization, they know what they're talking about.
Yeah. Of course, it all depends upon what you mean by advanced. If it means having big buildings and advanced weapons and flying machines, that's one sign of advancement. But another sign of advancement may not necessarily be connected with high technology and urban civilization and things like that. It may be connected with the ability to get along with other people or get along with your planet, your environment. I mean, there are different signs of advancement. So I think our modern human civilization, it is very advanced in terms of development of technology and urbanization and political organization and all of that. But in terms of this other type of advancement that I'm talking about, the ability to get along with other people, to really understand what the real ultimate purpose of life is, what are the real values and that should be respected in human society, and what behavior should be rewarded and what behavior should be discouraged. I think we're not so advanced, and there's signs of that all around us. But yeah, and I've always been fascinated with the descriptions in the Puranas of civilizations that existed in the past that had, for example, vimanas, spacecraft, aircraft. There are elaborate descriptions in the Puranas of these vimanas, which are of different types. Uh, as I said, the picture of the cosmos is of a multi-level cosmos with different levels of energies ranging from pure consciousness to the gross physical elements. So on our level of the cosmos, where the gross physical elements are very dominant, the Vimanas tend to be made of gross physical elements, metals and things like that. If we want to, like, if we want to make an airplane, well, we have to mine minerals, refine them, put the parts together in factories and things like that. But on the higher, more subtle realms of the cosmos, there are other ways of manifesting Vimanas. There were yogis like Kardama Muni, who, by his yogic powers, his ability to mentally control the elements, was able to manifest mentally a Vimana in which he took his wife, Devahuti, and traveled with her all over the universe, going to different planetary systems and galaxies and things like that in this fantastic flying city, this Vimana that he manifested by his yogic power. So there are different types of Vimanas described in these ancient texts. Different types of weapons. You were mentioning nuclear weapons, but yeah, these ancient Vedic texts mention a weapon called a Brahmastra. And when you read the descriptions of the effects of this weapon, it's stated like if you took a million suns and put them all together in one place, it would be like that much energy, being released. It's kind of interesting. Robert Oppenheimer, the American physicist who was heading up the scientists who were trying to develop an atomic bomb for America during World War II. He was, in addition to being a great physicist, he was also a student of the Sanskrit literature of ancient India. And when the first atomic bomb was tested at Alamogordo, New Mexico in 1945, he was in a bunker and he saw it go off, and he began reciting verses from the Bhagavad-Gita in Sanskrit that talk about this destructive, powerful energy that can emanate from the source of everything. So, yes, these ancient civilizations, they were advanced in many ways.
Yeah, it seems like I don't think we came out of being stone people or stone age people. I think there was a more advanced civilization possibly where there was a huge cataclysm sort of put everyone back at the stone age, and we had to come out of that. And perhaps that's why we think, beginning of time is only 6, 10,000, 11,000 years ago instead of seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, I definitely think there have been repeated catastrophes that have taken place. I mean, that information is given in the Vedic text of ancient India. Practically every wisdom tradition in the world has the idea that there are periodic catastrophes that take place. And I think, however, that in the higher levels of the cosmos, there are intelligent human-like beings who have the resources to get things started again on our level. And It's sort of like people today, they keep their digital information in the cloud, they say. Like your songs, your pictures, your files, everything in the cloud. So that if your device, your laptop or your smartphone or whatever it is you're using, gets destroyed, well, then the information and the files are still up there, and you get a new device and you can just download it and start things up again. So I think that sort of thing goes on in the cosmos. I think there's a lot backed up on some level that's beyond the influence of these catastrophes. If there is some catastrophe that takes place that wipes out life on this planet, then the resources are there to restart things. But I think there are a lot of parallels. I mean, modern science says over the past couple of billion years, there have been 6 major extinction events that have wiped out most life on this planet. And according to the Vedic cosmology, there have been 6 devastations that have taken place over the past couple of billion years, because they see we're in the basic unit of Vedic cyclical time is called the Kalpa, or the day of Brahma, and it lasts 4.32 billion years, and it's divided into 14 subperiods called manvantars. And according to the Vedic cosmological calendar, we're now in the 7th manvantar. That means there have been 6 before us over the past couple of billion years, and in between each of them, it's stated in the Puranas, there was a devastation after which the earth had to be repopulated. So I see these parallels. Modern paleontology saying over the past couple of billion years, there have been 6 major extinction events, the last one being the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. And these Vedic texts saying over the past couple of billion years, there have been 6 catastrophes. The parallels are just really interesting if you contemplate them.
There must be a lot of mythology. After theology school, I got turned on to Joseph Campbell, The Power of Myth, and I felt like that really gave an opportunity to see cultures and civilizations and traditions and generic themes. And it seems like mythology is one of those important things that seem to be all around the world. What's your take on mythology?
Well, it depends upon what one means by mythology. If by mythology one means just some hallucination, then that isn't very helpful. But if by mythology one means some way of capturing the truth about the universe and the self and their relationship and the relationships of everything to the source of everything, if it means, yes, there's some way in which a people have encoded that real information about those fundamental aspects of reality, it may have been in the form of accounts of stories or patterns of events, dramatized in some way. But if it's capturing that essential information in some way, then if that's what you mean by mythology, then yeah, I totally accept that. But if you just mean, it's all, none of it's nothing, no relationship with anything real, just some hallucinations, some things
No.
that people, that that kind of explanation of mythology. People use the word in a derogatory, negative sense. That characterization of it, I don't accept.
And the Vedics spend a lot of time focusing on the spiritual practice. Do you think that's really part of the strength of India and the Vedics?
Uh, well, I think it's the strength of any any wisdom tradition that leads you to these understandings. I think the basic understanding is I'm a being of pure consciousness, you're a being of pure consciousness, we're all beings of pure consciousness, we're all coming from the same source. No need to divide ourselves up into competing, fighting groups on the basis of superficial characteristics. That's really not necessary. And we should just find a way to satisfy our material needs in the most simple, natural, efficient, and fair way possible, while putting most of our human energy into developing that resource of consciousness. And however one now that takes some discipline, because there's a tendency to get distracted by other kinds of mentalities, especially in a world that wants to keep you entangled in producing and consuming more and more material things, and being in competition with each other for control of material resources on the basis of nationality, religion, race, all these different superficial kinds of identity. So yeah, there are a lot of forces in the world today that would, the whole education system, the whole political system, the whole economic system is just dedicated in this age to keeping people with their nose to the grindstone, be a good producer and consumer of material things in competition with each other, because that drives you to do it more and more intensely. And the results of all that activity kind of flow in certain patterns for the benefit of certain sectors of society. So, yeah, to withdraw your consciousness from that, it does require some discipline, I would say. It requires the ability to concentrate on the real self. So I think every great wisdom tradition has something that is comparable to meditation, yoga, something of that, contemplation, prayer, whatever they tend to call it. And then also that search for the ultimate source of all being. I think that has to be part of one's life, one's outlook, one's way of relating to the world. And then also the ability to see that not just all human beings are beings of pure consciousness, but every life form is a being of pure consciousness, whether it's animal, plant, insect, whatever. And it's not just confined to this planet, but we're part of a whole galactic and universal society of conscious beings existing on different levels. So to explore that reality, I think it does require some discipline, some practice, some form of meditation or something to do that.
Thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate those last comments there. That for me, when I went to study theology, I was also looking for love and truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought that if I could go back far enough in the text and sort of discover what the original intent and meaning was, I could just translate it, and then everything would be fine and people would get along better.
That's the absolute truth. That is the ultimate. Yeah, because really, I'm known for my book Forbidden Archeology, but to me that's just a step in the direction. You go from the stones and the bones. Well, what does it all mean? Well, it means we need a new understanding of who we are, and that gets you back to consciousness and a consciousness-based universe and truth and love and all the things that are associated with consciousness. But I don't claim to have any monopoly on truth.
No, me either. Me
Truth,
either.
truth, truth is where you find it. Like you can have gold, you could stamp it with the symbols of different nations, but if it's really gold, it doesn't matter what symbol you've stamped on it. So if you've got realization and understanding and truth and love, well, you can call it Hinduism or Judaism or Native American tribal wisdom or whatever. But if you've got it, it doesn't matter really what you call it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. And I think in this age, we're getting to that place where the rubber's going to meet the road, and we have to be disciplined, and we have to sort of prove why we're here.
Did you say the Roberts are going to meet the road?
Yeah, that too. That
Yeah.
too.
But yeah, I agree. The rubber is meeting the road.
It is. Well, I know you're off to India tomorrow,
Yeah.
so you're probably getting up early.
Well, probably I'm going to get up a little bit late. My flight's late in the day. Certain airline traveling by Emirates. So, they fly LA to Dubai for 16 hours, then a couple hours in the Dubai airport, and then 6 hours from Dubai to Calcutta.
Wow, that's a long ride.
Yeah, sometimes I break it up, but I want to get there as quickly as possible.
So are you going to be doing research, or are you going to be speaking
Well,
engagements?
I'll be doing a number of things. I'm a member of the Hare Krishna movement, and we have a project that our founding spiritual master wanted. It's called the Temple of Vedic Planetarium, and it will be a temple, but also a planetarium and museum with several floors of exhibits and a planetarium theater that can seat up to 250 people.
Wow.
And it will display the Vedic cosmology, the multi-level universe, the Vimanas, how the soul evolves from one level of consciousness to another, and kind of the scientific evidence that sort of backs these things up. So I'm part of a committee or an advisory group that's responsible for developing the plans for the museum exhibits and the films that'll be shown in this planetarium theater. And it's a huge, amazing project. Of course, once it's up and running, then digitally, you'd be able to access it from anywhere in the world, through virtual reality and augmented reality and all those kinds of things. We're also expecting a lot of people to come in person.
Wow, that sounds very interesting. I like the whole planetarium idea mixed together with a museum, explaining the multiverse. That's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing. But it'd also be a spiritual vacation for me.
Uh-huh.
It's a
Nice.
sacred place, high energy place. So I get to recharge my spiritual batteries there.
Are there specific sacred sites or places that you prefer to go to or that you like to go to?
Well, for those of us in this tradition, the Bhakti Yoga tradition, Mayapur in West Bengal is where I'm going. It's a place where there was an incarnation of Krishna that appeared about 500 years ago. His name was Chaitanya, and he was and this is a little bit esoteric, but he's a combined form of Radha and Krishna together. So Bhakti concept of God includes the male and the female aspect. Radha being the personification of the female aspect, Krishna. It's said in some of the esoteric scriptures that at a certain point, Krishna decided, I want to experience the feelings of love that Radha has for me. So he adopted her mentality, and the form of Chaitanya is considered the combined form of Radha and Krishna. And his purpose was to spread the teachings of Bhakti Yoga all over the world. You could say the esoteric aspect of it was to experience the feelings of a lover of God. In other words, God desiring to experience the feelings of love of God by taking the position of a devotee rather than the God position. A little esoteric, but Mayapur is the place where he appears on the banks of the Ganges River. It's a rural area, tropical area, beautiful place. So going to chill there for a month.
Sounds fantastic. That sounds a great way to spend the winter.
Yeah, but I'm really looking forward to coming to Sedona.
Yeah, that's a whole nother kind of spiritual, metaphysical experience of the land here.
It definitely is.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to everyone coming here as well. I think there's really a nice, strong lineup of people whose work will overlap and bring light to some new ideas and new perceptions, or just renew the ones that are worth remembering.
Well, I think you're doing a really fantastic service, for, I mean, everyone has their role to play, and you're playing a very nice one in bringing together researchers, others who are interested in these things, and maybe even attracting some people who've never gone in this direction before.
Yeah, probably. It's a good possibility. Well, I really enjoy all of this. After theology school, I had a lot more questions than I had answers.
Where did you go to? Did you go to, which theology school did you go to?
I was at Christian theology school,
Mm-hmm.
and I started with the Old Testament because I figured you probably should start at the beginning or the oldest parts and move forward from there.
Yeah.
And there were just so many questions, dates and times were one of the big ones. When they don't line up, how do you how do you resolve that? And so I love this material, and I'm so fascinated by ancient culture and traditions and what they have in common. It seems like they have a lot more in common than they have in difference, and I like to see those ideas percolate up to the regular masses so that they're aware of that as well.
Yeah, I was born in a Roman Catholic family, and
I hear a lot of that.
I kind of liked it, but um, I've kind of added some things to it, you could say. But I mean, once, when I was younger, in my early 20s, I, was kind of backpacking around Europe, and as the weather was getting colder, I was there in the fall and winter was coming on. So some people told me you can go to Israel and stay on a kibbutz, and that way you can live there over the winter and you won't be spending any money. You might even be earning a little bit. Go back to Europe later. So I went there in 1969, and in December, I was working on a kibbutz in Israel, and there were some other Western people there, kids, and we kind of got permission to go to Bethlehem on Christmas night. So it was really pretty amazing because there had recently been a war there weren't any tourists around.
Right.
So we kind of had the place to ourselves.
Wow.
So I went to the Church of the Nativity, went down into the crypt, where they say Christ was born. And there were just some Belgian nuns down there, about 6 of them. They were singing some Christmas carols in Latin or something. And it was really kind of the best Christmas I ever had.
Huh. Yeah, well, it seems also, a lot of the speakers so far that I've been talking to, what everyone has in common is not only the love of ancient culture, but the love of travel. Travel seems to be an integral component to this studying and researching this material, because going directly to the source to find information, and a lot of times you have to travel for that.
Yeah, it seems to be my destiny to do it. Yeah, I was born, like I said, born into a military family, and of course, I grew up. Every 2 or 3 years, we were moving to a different base somewhere in the world, or Hawaii, different Germany, different places.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of grew up traveling, and I've never stopped.
Thank you so much for your time, Michael. I know you got to catch this trip to India tomorrow, so I don't want to keep you too long.
Nice touching base with you like this.
Absolutely. Yeah, very nice. I'll get this edited and we'll get it up on the YouTube channel so that we can share it around. And I'm so looking forward to what you'll be sharing along with the other speakers in May at the Earth Origins event, because I think as much as we have so many multiple crises going on across the world, I think this ancient information, I've always believed this, is really important somehow to help inform us how to better navigate where we are now and where we're going in the near future.
I wouldn't be doing anything in this area if I didn't think that.
Right. Totally agree. Okay, Michael, thank you so much for your time. And
thank you.
And have a safe journey to India and back. And we look forward to new stuff that you discover when you're over there.
Okay. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you. Bye.